to many of you, especially with Valentine's Day approaching. So I want to begin by, just a little disclaimer so everybody can be put their minds at ease a little bit. I know that many of you who are out there watching this are very busy people with lots on your plate. And sleep is often the first thing to go when we are juggling all the demands of living. I also know that COVID-19, which of course we are still living through, has introduced a number of challenges and specifically challenged our sleep in a number of ways. And these are persistent sleep challenges. There's a number of reasons why COVID-19 has been so disruptive, or at least caused some significant changes to our sleep. First of all, we know there have been profound disruptions in our daily routines, particularly when schools were online, work was entirely remote. We're beginning to see some transition back to normal, but it is a new normal. And there's a lot still that's in flux and unpredictable in our daily routines. Many, particularly while we were experiencing stay-at-home orders, had reduced access to outdoor activity or sunlight exposure, which can have a direct impact on your sleep. Of course, there's the tremendous uncertainty and stress that we've all been living through and continue to live through as a result of living through a pandemic. And this also has a direct impact on how well or poorly we sleep. Many people, as we're quarantined or experiencing social distancing, experience social isolation and loneliness, which are both risk factors for sleep disturbance. And some people, as we cope with the stress of the pandemic, have led to some not so healthy behaviors like increased alcohol consumption or not exercised as much, both of which can be detrimental to our sleep. So I say all of this to recognize that, the goal of today's talk is not to shame any one of you in any way for, not being a, perfect sleeper. Rather, my goal is to help you with some simple strategies to start improving the quality of your sleep so you can get the best quality sleep that you can, and to help you understand why it's so important for you to start making sleep more of a priority in your life. So here's what I'm going to cover today. First, I'll talk about some of the basics about what sleep is. Then I'll talk about some of the consequences when we don't get the sleep we need. And then I'll talk about some strategies that you can engage in beginning this very evening to improve the quality of your sleep. So I like to think about the definition of sleep because it's a really sort of broad construct in three primary ways. We can think about sleep as a fundamental biological function, as a social behavior, and as a universal phenomenon. Now I'm going to talk about each of these sort of definitions of sleep in turn. First, we know that sleep is a vital part of our lives, and it actually occupies a major proportion of our life. In fact, the average person, if they get the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, will spend approximately 1/3 of their lives asleep. That means a person who lives to be 75 years old will spend 25 years or 9,125 days of her life asleep. That is a major part of our existence, and yet so many people take it for granted. Now, the other thing about sleep that is often really a misconception, we all sleep and we all do it, but many people really don't know what sleep is. And that's partly because sleep as a science is a relatively young science. So even those of us in the field of sleep are still learning about it. But here's what we definitely do know about sleep. And it's often misunderstood in the public. Now, many people think about sleep as sort of like, it's almost like a coma, like it's this dead space, right? Where everything shuts down. It's like turning off the lights in our brains and our bodies. Well, the truth of the matter is that couldn't be further from the truth. Sleep is actually a highly active and dynamic state. And this is a really important misconception to disabuse, because I think it leads to that cultural kind of tendency that we have to undermine the importance of sleep. If you think that sleep is this sort of dead space, then of course you think that, you're going to be more productive simply by sacrificing sleep. Well, that is simply not the truth. The truth of the matter is that sleep is highly active and dynamic. That is, we can characterize different stages of sleep throughout the night. It's not just one unitary concept. The two primary stages of sleep are called non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep is the type of sleep that we typically associate with dreaming, although dreams can occur in non-REM sleep as well. Non-REM sleep is further divided into 4 stages, stage 1 to 4, corresponding with increasing depth of sleep. Now, there's also a misconception for those who understand and have some sort of tracker that may or may not be accurately telling you how much of each component of sleep you're getting. There is sort of this idea that we can gamify sleep, that, oh, well, I just need more REM sleep tonight, or I need more deep sleep. Well, that's really not how sleep works. Healthy sleep is a composite, like, a lovely mixed salad of all of the components of sleep. And really what defines healthy sleep is getting adequate amounts of all stages of sleep on a regular basis. Because each stage of sleep, whether it be light sleep or REM sleep, serves a specific biological or physiological function. So if you sacrifice one state in pursuit of another state, which, by the way, really doesn't work, you're really not getting the benefits of healthy sleep. Now, another lesser known truism about sleep is that sleep is a social behavior. And what I mean by that is several things. First of all, we know that sleep is socially patterned. So we can see differences in sleep based on a variety of social and sociodemographic characteristics, including education and income, where you live, and factors such as your race and the experience of racism. Now, unfortunately, like virtually every other health outcome, sleep is socially patterned, gradient, socially disadvantaged, showing higher levels of sleep disturbance and sleep disorders than those who are further up on the socioeconomic ladder. The other critical piece that is often forgotten about sleep, and why I say it's a social behavior, is that most adults are sleeping with a partner. According to US data, about 66% of US adults are regularly sharing a bed with a partner. And that's pretty important to recognize, because in the natural world, most people are sharing a bed. And yet the vast majority of sleep science has viewed sleep and measured sleep as an entirely individual behavior. So if you think about the typical sleep laboratory setup, or if you've ever had a sleep study, what do? We bring an individual into the lab and we isolate them as much as possible. And we look at sleep and risk factors for sleep disturbance entirely at the individual level. But here's the thing, that's not how sleep occurs in the real world. Sleep in the real world is often noisy, interrupted, and as I show here, shared with a partner for many adults. And because I have spent most of my career studying the social context of sleep, I'm often asked, this question comes up all the time from reporters or from people at a cocktail party. Is it bad if my partner and I sleep apart? Well, the answer is no, not necessarily. The truth is, there are many reasons why some couples, even healthy couples, may choose to sleep apart. Maybe there are family obligations like a newborn or a young child who likes to weasel their way into the bedroom. Or maybe one partner has a sleep disorder or snores, which can have a big impact on the other partner's sleep. Or maybe one of you works nights or is just a natural night owl, whereas the other is more of a morning person. There are lots of reasons why couples may choose that sleeping apart is the best way for both partners to get the sleep they need. And one of the reasons why I wrote my book is to really emphasize that how couples sleep together or apart is really a couple level decision, best determined, with you and your partner. But what's truly important is that as a couple, if you're in a couple relationship, that you prioritize sleep, not only for your own health and well-being, as I'll soon discuss, but also for the health of your relationship. And as I say in my book, for many people in our increasingly sleep-deprived society, great sleep is the new great sex. So it makes sense that we should consider it as a critical part of our romantic relationships. So the third truism about sleep is that it is a universal phenomenon across virtually every known species, from the smallest of fruit flies to complex mammals like humans. Now, this is important because when you consider any sort of bio-behavioral phenomenon that is so universal across species, it's really another testament to how vital sleep is to health, functioning, productivity, and even survival. That's the only way it would have survived through the process of evolution. The other aspect of sleep being a universal within human beings, at least, is that throughout our lifespan, we never stop needing sleep. It is true, however, that across the lifespan, our specific sleep duration needs change. So in the early stages of life, among newborns, sleep is actually the primary activity of life. Infants spend more time asleep than they do awake. And that's really a testament to how vital sleep is for neurological and cognitive development. And you can see as we march up through the age span, our sleep duration needs do gradually decrease, but not by as much as many people think. So, grade school children need somewhere around 9 to 11 hours. When children reach adolescence, they're not just mini adults. They actually still require more sleep than adults, about 8 to 10 hours. And then adults are somewhere in the range of needing 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Now here's another sad truth. Many adults are simply not sleeping enough. About 1 in 3 US adults regularly fall under the recommended guidelines of at least 7 hours of sleep per night. And the situation, is even more dire among teenagers. About 2 out of 3 teenagers are regularly sleep deprived, meaning they're not achieving the minimum recommendation of 8 hours of sleep per night. And as a parent of 2 teenagers myself, and even as a sleep scientist, I can tell you how very difficult it is to get a teenager to be able to regularly sleep 8 hours per night. And that's in large part due to early school start times, which is the topic of my TED Talk that was mentioned at the beginning. So now let's move on to some of the consequences when we don't get the sleep we need. And just to summarize, the research clearly shows, and I won't be covering all of it today, so this is really just a summary, that when we don't get the sleep we need, our brains, our bodies, our mental health and behavior, and our relationships and our productivity all suffer. So the consequences of sleep loss are felt not only by the individual, They also affect our loved ones, our families, our society, and even the global economy. Let's talk about each of these just briefly in turn. So one thing that we know when people don't get the sleep they need is that there are cognitive consequences. And I'm sure everyone who is listening has experienced some of these before. When you're not getting the sleep you need, you get that sort of brain fog. Science shows us that with sleep loss, attention, creativity, memory, and problem solving all suffer. This can, of course, affect how students learn and how we perform at our jobs. And there are also long-term cognitive consequences of sleep loss. Emerging evidence is now showing that sleep loss may play a direct role in the development of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. And beyond these cognitive consequences, including the consequences for cognitive and brain health, we know that sleep loss affects virtually every aspect of our physical functioning and health. So name a disease or name a condition, including the major chronic health conditions that plague our society, including obesity, heart disease, diabetes, risk of infectious illness. These are all associated with, or increased risk for these illnesses is associated with sleep loss. And it's also important as we talk about the mental health consequences of sleep loss to understand really what happens in our brains, and not just in our brains as adults, but also in the brains of our children and adolescents when they don't get the sleep they need. So there are two sort of primary parts of the brain that are most profoundly affected by sleep loss. They are the prefrontal area and the amygdala. Now, the prefrontal area of the brain is where sort of reasoning, good judgment, and problem solving occur. You can think about the prefrontal area as sort of the braking system of the brain. This is the thing that's saying, oh, slow down, think about it, sort of use some executive processing to think through the consequences of your actions. So that is highly affected by sleep loss. Actually, what happens under sleep-deprived conditions is we see a down regulation of the prefrontal area. The other part of the brain that is strongly affected by sleep loss is kind of the reverse effect. It's the amygdala area of the brain. Now, what happens in the amygdala is, this is where sort of our emotions emanate, where impulsive sort of behaviors and risky behaviors often stem. It's kind of, you can think about it as the gas pedal, the go, go, go response of our brain. So ideally, you want to have a really sort of balanced system between that gas pedal and an effective braking system. What happens under sleep-deprived conditions is that we see, as I said, this down regulation of the braking system, and at the same time, an upregulation or an amplification of the amygdala response or the gas pedal. Now that can set the stage for really risky and sometimes dangerous behaviors. And this is particularly true in teenagers because developmentally already, their amygdalas, the gas pedal, matures at a faster rate than the prefrontal area. So there's already developmentally an imbalance. If you overlay sleep loss on top of that, you can really see sort of the potential negative consequences of a system that's really heavy on the gas and without fully functional brakes. And not surprising, we know from substantial amounts of research that there's this two-way street between sleep problems and mental health problems. By that, I mean this. First of all, sleep problems are a symptom of virtually every known mental health problem. But it's not just that sleep problems go along with the presence of a mental health problem. It's also true that sleep problems can predict the onset of new mental health problems. What's really interesting, and we've learned this from some research that's come out during COVID, is that not only are the presence of sleep problems a risk factor for developing sleep problem or mental health problems? But actually promoting and preserving sleep health can actually be a really important resilience factor, protecting one from the onset of mental health problems, for instance, during a pandemic, during a very stressful time. So this really highlights that one of the best things we can do to support our mental health fitness and resilience is to support our sleep, particularly during these stressful times we're under. There are also behavioral consequences of sleep loss. And I mentioned this again as a reminder that the effects of sleep loss go well beyond the individual. It also can be a matter of public safety. So studies have shown that after just 4 or 5 nights of being restricted to less than 5 hours of sleep per night, healthy human participants will function on reaction time tasks at the same level of impairment as if they were legally drunk. Just sit on that for a moment and sit on that and think about the number of times where you yourself may have gotten behind the wheel of a car while chronically sleep deprived, or you've allowed your teenager to get behind the wheel of a car while they're sleep deprived. And here's another scary fact. About 1 in 10 car crashes are caused by drowsy drivers, and young drivers, including teenagers, disproportionately account for these drowsy driving crashes. Another, social consequence of sleep, again, relates to a topic I discuss quite a bit in my book, is, how sleep loss affects our closest relationships, including our relationships with our partner and our family. We know from elegantly designed research studies that under sleep deprived or sleep disturbed conditions, people show higher levels of conflict with their partner. Their moods are disrupted. They're more prone to irritability and depression. They have lower frustration tolerance. So you're more likely to lash out, especially when irritable, at your partner or your loved one. We also know that communication skills, empathy, the feelings of your partner also suffer under sleep deprived conditions. So you put this all together, and this can be a really toxic combination for relationships. So again, as I always say, and I speak strongly to in my book, if you're not going to sleep for yourself, then do it for your closest relationships and frankly, everyone else around you. So I've now gone through a litany of all the things that go wrong when you don't sleep. And the last thing I want to do is give you yet another reason to keep you up at night. So the takeaway message is not that we're all doomed because we're sleep deprived. Rather, I want to leave you with some simple strategies and the knowledge that there are changes that you can make that can make a big difference in your life, in your family's life, and really have an impact on society as well. So let's move on to the ways we can improve sleep. As I said, it's about small changes. I think sometimes this can feel overwhelming, and the more you read or learn, it can feel like, oh my gosh, we're really doomed. But I want to encourage everyone who's listening tonight to think not only about the changes that you can make for yourself, but maybe at your family level, even at the community level, there are opportunities to make changes in sleep and how we view sleep as a culture that can make a big difference overall. So first, it's important that we stop this, mortally informed belief or misconception that, sleep is for the weak or sleep is the thing you do when you're dead. Rather, we need to start recognizing sleep as the fundamental biological necessity that it is, and make it a priority. It truly is as important, if not more important, than diet and physical activity. Because just think about it. When you're poorly slept, you're actually more likely to have a poor diet and less likely to exercise. So we really need to be thinking about sleep as the foundation that supports healthy living in general. and prioritize, first of all, allowing adequate opportunity for sleep depending on your various age group. As I said, adults need around 7 to 9 hours, and as you march down the lifespan, adolescents and children and infants need significantly more. And I can provide you with some resources to refer to these recommendations after the talk. A second rule that people often don't pay much attention to is the importance of setting a consistent wake-up routine. Everybody often will focus, if they're trying to improve their sleep, on bedtime, which is absolutely important, but I'd actually encourage you to focus on wake-up time first. And then you just back up the hours, trying to establish a window of adequate opportunity for sleep to determine bedtime. But wake-up time is really the most important thing to set to begin with and to be consistent about it, because wake-up time is the single most important cue to help set our internal biological clock, otherwise known as our circadian rhythm. Wake-up time will also give you exposure to morning light, which is also another powerful regulator of our circadian rhythms. This can be very hard to do, particularly with teenagers, or if you're somebody who has to wake up very early for work during the work week or school week. But I do recommend that you try to keep your weekend hours roughly similar to your weekday wake-up times. So within about 2 hours of your usual wake-up time. You don't want to fluctuate too much in wake-up times because we as human beings really just respond better, and our circadian rhythms function better when we have relative consistency. Too big swings in wake-up times throughout the week is really going to set you up for sleep disturbance and feeling, frankly, pretty crummy during the daytime. As I mentioned, wake-up time and being consistent about that also gives you opportunity to get exposure to morning light. And I really encourage everyone, particularly during these winter periods, to be effortful and schedule time to get outside for about 20 to 30 minutes, ideally, of some morning light. If it's really dark where you are, if there's no sunlight, even consider using a light box. Because that powerful light in the morning is another powerful regulator to help set your circadian rhythm, which can improve sleep at night. It also can help improve mood and protect against those, seasonal blues that many people experience when it's dark so much of the time. Make bedrooms media-free zones. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you this, but it's so important as media becomes so ubiquitous throughout our lives. We know that there's two primary reasons why use of electronic devices, particularly at night, are so detrimental to our sleep. The first is that many of our electronic devices, particularly our phones, emit blue light, and blue light is the specific type of light that is known to suppress the hormone melatonin. Melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness. It's the hormone that's responsible for signaling to our brains that night is here, and therefore sleep should be coming. If you have a blast of blue light exposure, particularly in the late evening hours, that's going to suppress that natural signaling to the brain that it's time to prepare for sleep. The other reason beyond blue light, because people will always ask me the next question, well, what if I have a blue light blocker? It's really not sort of completely resolving the problem, because also think about the content you're consuming, that we're all consuming on our devices, whether it be the distressing, news reports that we're scrolling through, otherwise known as doom scrolling, or whether, it's, for your teenager, some, juicy gossip about who's dating who, or who broke up with who, or did you not get invited to some party? All of these things are very emotionally activating and not producing the kind of calm, relaxing state that you want to be in, that you need to be in, to be able to prepare for a healthy, good quality night of sleep. And I'll just say from some research that we did, if you think that your teenager is the exception who brings their phone into their bedroom but doesn't use their phone, I can tell you that's probably not true. We found that 70% of teens were texting between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And for the average teen who has to wake up at 6 a.m. or 6:30 to get to school on time, that means that that 8-hour window is the window that they need to be asleep in order to be getting their adequate minimum 8 hours of sleep per night. So they're being disrupted by the content notifications that happen with their technology in the bedroom. We also know that teens are watching their parents and children are watching their parents. So studies have also shown that children or teens who have technology in the bedroom are more likely to have parents who have technology in the bedroom. So my recommendation here is make a family decision, a family rule, that there's a family charging station outside of anyone's bedrooms where every night, everyone in the family disconnects from their phones, allows their phones to recharge overnight. Well, each member of the family allows their brains and bodies to effectively recharge overnight by getting the sleep they need. Moving on to what we can do as communities. Tonight is a great example of educating our communities about the importance of sleep. So we can start minimizing the influence of this, again, mortally misinformed belief that the sleep is for the weak or sleep is something that we sacrifice. We can also, for our children and adolescents, start encouraging school districts to support healthy school start times, as many school districts across the country have already done. And in fact, the state of California, beginning next year, will be instituting a statewide mandate that schools, middle and high schools, start at a healthy hour of no later than 8 a.m. In our workplaces, we can also try to foster, particularly those who are in positions of authority, sleep-friendly policies. So that includes not sending emails at 2 a.m. And in schools, for instance, not requiring homework to be due at midnight. These types of policies, whether in the workforce or in schools, are again reinforcing this idea that we don't care about sleep as a society. And that simply needs to change. Now, for some people listening, you may be struggling with sleep on a really recurrent basis, and even these strategies that I've given you may not be enough. So it is important to recognize that for some people, there is a need for professional medical advice and treatment. So when to pursue professional advice. The real rule of thumb is that if you're experiencing sleep problems, most nights a week for a month or longer, that's probably a signal that you may want to talk to your provider about what's going on to see if something else, some other type of treatment might be useful. If you have concerns that other medical or psychiatric issues that you might be experiencing are contributing to your sleep problems, or that your sleep problems are exacerbating existing mental or physical health problems, that's another reason to speak to your provider. If your sleep problems are interfering with your ability to do your work, to function in your family, these are other good reasons to seek professional advice. And if you experience other types of symptoms that could be indicative of a sleep disorder, including loud snoring or gasping for air at night, frequent and distressing nightmares, excessive daytime sleepiness, or falling asleep at the wheel, these are all symptoms that could be signs of sleep disorders that do require specialized medical treatment. One fact I want to get across to you, however, though, is that for those of you who may be experiencing insomnia type symptoms, and insomnia is the most common sleep disorder. It's characterized by chronic difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, or just poor non-refreshing sleep quality. Many people incorrectly assume that the frontline treatment for insomnia is to take a pill, and that may be discouraging to many people. Well, I'm here to say that actually what we know from robust amounts of research is that the frontline treatment for insomnia is actually not does not come in a pill. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So it's a type of behavioral treatment that is non-medication treatment that has been proven to be as effective, longer lasting, and without the side effects of medications. So I really encourage you, if you're someone who suffers from insomnia on a chronic basis or knows someone who does, to not be discouraged by the thought that, oh, the last thing I want is to have to take a pill for the rest of my life. That there are treatments, behavioral ones, that are effective and that are out there for you. You just need to ask about it. And with that, I will close with the question that, in various forms, people ask me all the time, and this is really sort of the holy grail that many have been looking for a long time. What would the world look like? What would my life look like if we simply didn't need for sleep? And I think we often fantasize about this, about how much we could get done, how productive we could be. I'm here to say that the situation is actually much more bleak than that. If we sacrifice sleep and get rid of that crucial recovery time that only happens during sleep, we'd all burn out with detriments to our health, our functioning, our productivity, and even our survival. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering some questions. I think we still have a good amount of time for the Q&A, so please put them in the chat. We will go from there. Thank you.
Yes, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat. We have a few. One question is, one of our watchers feel that they get their best sleep between like 8 and 10 when they fall asleep in front of the TV. How does that affect your sleep for the rest of the night when you do fall asleep to media like that?
That's a great question, and I see this a lot of times with my patients who come to see me. It's important to know that there are two primary factors that govern our sleep. One, as I mentioned in my talk, is our circadian rhythm, biological clock. Circadian rhythms determine the optimal timing of our sleep, help us to stay asleep throughout the night. The other factor that controls our sleep is our sleep pressure or our sleep drive. And you can think about this as sort of a pressure that builds up, throughout however, our hours of wakefulness. So in theory, the more you're awake, the more that pressure builds, throughout the day, to the point when your head hits the pillow and you fall asleep. It's sort of like a rubber band. You want that rubber band of sleep pressure really taut when you're actually trying to go to bed. So here's what happens, and you can visualize this. If you're somebody who dozes on the couch from 8 to 10 p.m., which likely for most adults, because of our circadian rhythms, is not the time that you're really primed for your full episode of nocturnal sleep. What happens is, that rubber band, which is being increasingly tightened throughout the day, when you take a nap at 8 p.m. or fall asleep between 8 and 10 p.m., guess what happens to that rubber band? It becomes a little floppy. So that sleep pressure is now reduced, such that at the time when you actually try to go to bed, let's say at 10 p.m. for your full nocturnal episode of sleep, you don't have as much sleep drive accumulated. This results in difficulty falling asleep and poor quality sleep. So what I recommend to people, and this is really happening a lot because of the pandemic and our lives are just not as busy for many, the night feels long. So it's really understandable. I think a lot of people are just spending lots of hours, on our couches, and it's easy to doze off. You might actually, if that's happening to you, need to do something more active, or at least sit up. Sit at the edge of your couch to avoid that, taking a nap at a time which is really not going to be an effective nap, because what it's going to do is interfere with the quality of your nocturnal sleep. So I would really say, the first thing is to try to reduce that, and then see if you can maximize your sleep drive at the time you want, to sleep at 10 p.m. or whenever it is. Then start to look at whether you can sleep better. And if you're finding that you're still not, then that might be a reason to speak to a specialist in sleep to focus on maximizing your sleep quality at night.
Sure. One question I'm seeing in the chat is kind of the idea of, can you catch up on sleep? Like, can you use naps or, longer sleep times of the weekend to kind of catch up on the sleep that you maybe are missing during the week? Or is it more important to have that consistent amount of sleep?
This is another great question. And, again, this sort of elusive holy grail. So many people would like to think about sleep as this sort of bank account that you can withdraw from and then just pay back, a month later or whenever you have the time. It really doesn't work that way in the long term. Yes, temporary basis, there are always going to be some times in all of our lives where we have acute phases of, sleep loss or inadequate sleep, and we can recover from that. So we're not all going to fall apart just because we have some temporary, sleep restriction. The problem is when we lead our lives with this idea that we can pay back chronic sleep loss. That's when we run into problems, because that is not how healthy sleep works. It really is a bank account that you need to consistently be, investing into instead of withdrawing large amounts and hoping to pay it back, because that kind of really erratic sleep loss followed by catch-up sleep, it really has a significant effects on our circadian rhythms that really respond best when we have consistency and predictability throughout the week. And that's again why, for instance, for teenagers, I'm a parent of 2, so I know how hard it is for them to get adequate sleep per night. So I recognize that teenagers need some amount of catch-up sleep on the weekends until we change school start times, by the way. But they should not be sleeping 6 hours longer than they do during the week, because that's and sleeping in 6 hours later than their usual wake up time, because that's just going to create this really erratic pattern, which is not good for our brains or bodies.
Sure. A question I'm seeing a few times in the chat, and that I can definitely relate to, is some people are talking about having trouble, finding themselves waking up in the middle of the night and having trouble falling back asleep. It's not so much trouble initially falling asleep, but trouble once you've woken up in the middle of the night falling back asleep. Do you have any suggestions or methods for handling that?
That particular issue is called a sleep maintenance problem. So you don't have trouble falling asleep, but you have trouble maintaining sleep. And this is a very common sleep symptom that many people experience at least at some point in their life. And the best strategy for addressing, waking up and being unable to fall back to sleep is actually to do the opposite of what comes naturally, because what comes naturally for most people is to lie there in bed, staring at the ceiling and gritting your teeth and wishing yourself back to sleep. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work. So doing the opposite means this: if you're somebody who wakes up in the middle of the night and can't fall back to sleep after, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes, and use your internal judgment of that. Don't look at the clock. In fact, I recommend that you turn your clocks around in the middle of the night, because frankly, no useful information comes from finding out that it's 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night. It'll only make you frustrated. So if you're lying in bed awake for what feels like 20 to 30 minutes, get out of bed, go to another room ideally, or maybe even a chair in your bedroom, and do some relaxing but distracting other activity. So that by that, I mean doing something like reading a book, maybe listening to a podcast, coloring, listening to soothing music, maybe doing some deep breathing or yoga exercises, something that's relaxing but distracting enough that your brain kind of has the opportunity to switch channels, to get over the fact that it's not sleeping, and maybe forget a little bit that you're struggling to sleep. Because that struggle to sleep, particularly if you're lying in bed, effortfully trying to get yourself back to sleep, that's really antithetical to the sleep state. So you kind of want to give up on it, get distracted, do something relaxing. Now, don't do things like getting on your phone or getting on your computer or doing work or anything too stimulating. But what you may find is that as you engage in this other relaxing activity, like reading a book, you might actually get sleepy again. at which point you return to bed and you try to fall back to sleep. So it's really about breaking that habit of being awake and trying to sleep in bed, because being so effortful about the process of sleep simply doesn't work. Sleep has to come to you. You cannot chase it.
Excellent. I also see a question in the chat. Is walking or exercising in the evening recommended, or does it interfere with trying to get to sleep?
You know, there's a bit of debate about sort of the optimal timing for with regard to exercise and sleep, but the bottom line is exercise is good for sleep. I think you should pay attention to your own internal rhythms and how you feel. I think for most people, a walk in the evening is a really wonderful activity to engage in to sort of fill those evening hours. Of course, you get the benefit of exercise as well, and it can be very beneficial for sleep. The only downside of some types of exercise at night is, let's say you're doing really rigorous, exercise that might cause pain or really might amp you up, or if it's a very social exercise, that might make you a little too, stimulated and awake if it's too close to bedtime. But for most people, some level of physical activity at night, is absolutely fine. Just pay attention to yourself. If you find yourself really amped up after whatever exercise you're engaging in, maybe that level of intensity needs to be dialed back some. But mostly I say, exercise is good for everything, just like sleep is good for everything.
Sure. We have a question whether having to take like melatonin or something like that every night, is that an indicator of, a need for cognitive behavioral therapy, or a need to consult a clinician, or
Yeah, I would say if you're taking a medication every night to fall asleep, then it is worthwhile to consider a more effective behavioral treatment. If you're that dependent on something that comes in a pill, that suggests that there's a problem that you're worried enough about that you're taking a pill. And given that there are behavioral techniques that work, I would say absolutely, for lots of reasons, including the fact that they've been demonstrated to be more effective, it would be worthwhile consulting with your provider and finding out if there's a behavioral provider of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia in your area, or that offers teletherapy, because there are specialized people out there who do this.
Excellent. There's also a question in the chat. Can sleep, like exercise, be broken into intervals? Like, can you sleep several times during the day?
Yes, this is also a really controversial topic, and there was actually recently a consensus statement that came out from a number of my sleep colleagues and experts in the field that really comes down quite conclusively that the idea of segmented sleep is not recommended. This is the idea that you can sort of break sleep up instead of into sort of one consolidated chunk, which is how most humans in modern times, at least, how we sleep. On this idea that you could do segmented sleeps throughout the day and get the same benefits, it really has not been proven to be true. And so the recommendation is that a consolidated bout of sleep that's recommended is 7 to 9 hours for most adults. That is the healthiest sleep pattern.
All right. We also have a question about things like noise machines. Are those interruptive of sleep, or can those be helpful?
It really depends. I think that some people respond very well to things like white noise, particularly if you have any anxiety around falling asleep, or just like that background, maybe it's just too quiet. I think it can be really helpful for some people. I would just be cautious about the type of background noise that you're using. I do get a little edgy when I hear that people have to have the television on in the background to sleep, because our brains are really, complicated and elegant things that, our brains are able to simultaneously be monitoring external cues, including sounds, particularly human voices from the TV, at the same time we sleep. but that can lead to a competition. And if you're wanting to get the best sleep that you can, you want to sort of remove that part of the brain that's continuing to sort of, be monitoring for auditory signals, including human voices. So I think things like white noise or relaxing instrumental music, without voices, that can be helpful for some people. But, just to be conscious of, and things like with the TV, often our brains are aware that, like if you set a snooze on it, that it goes off at a certain point, that often can stimulate awakening in the individual, because your brains are sort of become habituated to, it knows it's going to turn off after 45 minutes. So that's really not what you're aiming for. So something that, if you're going to use noise, something that's more constant, that's more like a white noise, and experimenting with it, see how much it helps you.
Excellent. Oh, we have a question that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Do you have any suggestions for parents of newborns for getting
goodness. Take care of yourself, rally your supports. I do have a chapter in my book called Room for More, and really recognizing the huge role that sleep deprivation is, unfortunately, a very sort of normal part of adaptation to a newborn. It does happen. It's temporary, but it happens. And it's really important for newborn parents to recognize that in advance, that, we might not be behaving as our best selves for a period because we're sleep deprived. Now, that's not an excuse. And absolutely, that's why I say rally your supports. If somebody's coming over to, meet the new baby and see you, instead of, serving coffee and, entertaining, maybe, use that as an opportunity to take a nap. This is how we can really be supportive to parents of newborns. And as partners, really trying to divide and conquer the responsibilities and ensure that neither partner is getting such a chronic buildup of sleep deprivation that they really suffer. So sharing nighttime caregiving responsibilities, including if the mother is breastfeeding, there are ways for the father to become involved, whether it's right before bed feed, or taking a middle of the night feed with a bottle with express milk or formula. There are options, and really recognizing the importance of sleep for both of you to navigate this very, exciting but also stressful time. When we're better slept, we're just better able to cope with things. And being a parent of a newborn is amazing, but also stressful and challenging. So recognizing that by supporting your sleep and rallying your resources to allow you to get some sleep is really one of the best things you can do to adjust to this important time in life.
Excellent. All right, I think we have time for a couple more questions. One question was, do you have any suggestions for people that work overnight or late night shifts?
My hat's off to the night shift workers, whether, our society depends on this, and we are a 24/7 world. And we certainly see this with our medical community, as well as many other people who are, make our economy work by working nights. It is challenging for both, sleep and relationships among night shift workers are really challenged. And the thing that makes it so hard to get good quality sleep, if you're, working at a time when you should be sleeping, is that, and sleeping at a time when you should be awake, is, again, our bodies have these intrinsic natural circadian rhythms, which, for most adults dictate that we're supposed to be asleep at night and awake during the day. So you're trying to work against your biology. Necessarily, that's a hard thing to do. There are some strategies to try to improve the quality of sleep, even when sleeping during the day. For instance, wearing dark sunglasses on your drive home from your shift. If you're coming home right as the sun is rising, the sun rising is a real powerful cue to your brain that it's time to be awake. So you want to kind of block that out while being safe while driving. Certainly, if you're sleeping during the daytime, doing things like having blackout curtains, wearing an eye mask, using earplugs, and really getting an agreement from your family, which is really so important. of how can you guys navigate together to allow you to get the sleep that you must get during the daytime, which is naturally going to be more difficult. So you really need to, set the stage for better sleep. With night shift workers or people working shifts, that's also an example where taking things like melatonin and using light therapy, ideally, under the guidance of a medical professional who could help with that. Those can also be useful therapies to help adjust to night shift schedules.
Excellent. One last question that I'm seeing in the chat, a few people have asked, is there an ideal sort of duration of a nap? Like if you're going to be taking a nap, is there a time limit you should be looking at?
Yeah, it kind of varies. I generally recommend somewhere around a 30-minute nap. Some people say up to an hour is okay. The real important thing about naps is when they happen and why they happen. So actually, naps can be a wonderful thing. They can be very refreshing. A power nap can really energize you. But for most people, you want to have your nap happen early enough in the day that it's not going to disrupt your nocturnal sleep. So generally speaking, before 3 p.m. ideally, and shorter for most people is better, because the longer you sleep in your nap, the more likely you are to enter those deeper stages of sleep. And then, extracting yourself from those deeper stages of sleep can lead to grogginess and actually lower levels of energy. So that's why kind of shorter is generally better and earlier in the day is better. And again, if you're somebody who's napping because you're not getting enough sleep at night, I would also consider, addressing the root cause of the problem, because naps do not take place of adequate nocturnal sleep. We really do need that solid 7-8 hours of sleep per night. And for some people, augmenting that with a short nap in the day can be, quite delightful if your schedule allows, but it's really not about supplanting nighttime sleep for a nap.
All right, excellent. Oh, sorry, one last question. I do see a lot here. If you're waking up at night but able to go right back to sleep, should you be worried about that, or can you still be getting good quality?
I'm really happy to answer that question, because the last thing I want to do is make everybody think that you have a sleep disorder if you don't. As I said before, sleep is active and dynamic. Waking up in the middle of the night 1, 2, maybe 3 times is perfectly normal. And actually, we have awakenings in the middle of our night that we're not even aware of because they're so brief. So for most people, again, it's not the waking up that's the problem. It's the inability to fall back to sleep that's the problem. Now, if you're waking up 5, 6, 7 times per night, to go to the bathroom or for whatever reason, and you might want to consider that's, talking to your doctor about that, because it could be indicative of either a sleep disorder or something else going on. For instance, frequent urination, particularly as we age, can be more of an issue and can be, addressed in a number of different ways. But generally speaking, waking up in the middle of the night, as long as it's not distressing and as long as you're able to quickly fall back to sleep, that's really not the problem. It's when you can't fall back to sleep that you want to start engaging in some of these behavioral strategies, including getting out of bed and doing something relaxing until you get sleepy again.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we will wrap it up there. I want to let everyone know that we will be sending out a follow-up email that will link to some resources recommended by Dr. Troxel, and also her TED Talks and her book, of course, sharing the
Yes,
covers.
Valentine's Day coming, please do consider sharing the covers to all your loved ones, because it's probably the best gift we can give everyone we love is a good night of sleep.
Right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, and get some good sleep tonight, everyone. Have a good one.
Yes, sweet dreams. Take care.